Hi there, welcome to Hardware Heaven. I'm Stuart and today I'm going to be taking a look at the Fractal Design Arc Mini R2. Now the R2 is a revised edition of the Arc Mini, a case that was released around about 2 years ago, and despite being a micro ATX form factor it was actually rather popular. Now one of the reasons for that is you could pack a lot of high-end components into it despite the compact form factor, and that included water cooling configurations, although there were a few different just little things that forced you to have to think about what components you were going to have to use. So if you use particular radiators in the top, you couldn't use the rear fan, things like that. So Fractal Design have applied some tweaks to the design, changed it around a little bit, changed the dimensions and the internal layout a little bit, and now they are bringing it back to market with some really enhanced specifications. So for as one example, you can install a 360mm radiator in the top of the case, or a 240 down the front of it, anything like that. So very compact case, very big potential. So we'll take a look at that. We'll build a water-cooled rig inside the case and we'll see how it does and if there are any strange things or problems with the actual design. So let's get started. So here we have the Arc Mini R2 case. It's a construction which is a mixture of plastic and metal. So we have, for example, the metal side panels there. The grills on the top and front are metal with the surrounds on each of them being plastic. The front panel has two drive bays on it for optical drives or fan controllers, anything like that, and then below them the fan grill is push to release, so that comes off, and we have the felt lined grill there. Behind it, installed at the factory, we've got a 12cm fan. It is white blades and designed for low noise operation, which is pretty standard for Fractal cases. We've had a few of them in the past and they have generally been low noise operation, so that's going to be promising for this one. There's space for the second one there, and interestingly they're not actually mounted on the case themselves. If we pull the front off, which is easier from a different angle, see it just pulls off there, the case fan is actually mounted on the front panel rather than onto the case itself. So behind the fan we've got two sets of drive bays. We'll take a look at them in a little while and you can see just the space for the optical drives up the front there. To put these back on, just hit them back into place and then the front panel clicks in there. To remove the side panels we would just reach around the back and they slide off, and then the top is the same. It has a couple of screws on the back, we've already removed some of them, and again it just slides off nice and easy, and then we'd screw back into place. So we'll get the case turned round and then we'll take a look at some more of the features. Now we're round at the back of the Arc Mini R2 and you can see that the first feature at the top there is a couple of holes that we can run water cooling tubing through. They're covered by rubber there. There is a 12cm fan pre-installed at the factory, no holes for 14cm or anything like that. It's quite a compact case, so we wouldn't expect 14cm fans to fit there. There is an extra slot here for things that you can install extra USB ports that sometimes come bundled with motherboards. You could put a fan in there and have it blowing air down towards the PCIe slots, anything like that. Got the back panel location there, 4 PCIe slot covers. They're white, just adding a little bit of extra white into the case to match the fans, things like that, and then the PSU location down the bottom. Side window on the left hand side. If you were looking at the front of the case, that's the left. Obviously on this view it's the right, and there is some protective plastic on it at the moment. At the factory they apply that just to keep it in tip-top condition till it gets to us and we can tear it off. Usually causes a bit of static which you'll want to deal with before you put your hands on any other components, but it's nice to see that on there. And as I say, the sides just come off like that. So 2 screws on each side, and they're thumb screws, so it's very easy to get them off. I'll just tilt this over and let you see the base of the case. So on the base we have a large dust filter, 4 rubber feet. You can see the handle there for helping you pull off the front of the case, and this dust filter just slides out. There's a little catch on it there, so you have to pull it away and then pull it out. It means it doesn't just fall out when you're moving things around, which is always good. And there are 2 locations here behind the fan, the dust filter for a fan or radiator down the bottom, and then your PSU would sit here drawing air in over the filter. So that's the outside of the Arc Mini R2. Let's take a look inside. So we've stripped off the sides, the top, the filters, everything like that from the Arc Mini R2 so that we can get a good look inside. The other thing we've done is remove a lot of the screws for the drive bays, and we'll go over why in a moment, but what that's caused to happen is the actual drive bay here gets a little bit looser and drops the trays out of it. So if you're going to be taking any of the bays out of this case after you've built it, you'll want to remove the drive trays from their thing. The top one's not too bad actually, but the bottom 2 fell out there. Removal of drive trays is really easy. You just slide out and in from there. This one's a little bit tighter off the top and they click back into place. The usual case of if you've got a mechanical drive, you're just going to pop it in there and screw it in. You can also see there are screw holes there for 2.5-inch drives, so SSDs. 6 hard drives can go there. There's another location for 2 hard drives which we'll look at shortly. And as we mentioned earlier, 2 optical drives can go up there. So once you've loosened off the screws, and there are quite a lot of them on this case to get the drive bays out, that makes them really secure when the case is fully assembled. We can, for example, pull out the middle from there. So that would normally be screwed in, and what that allows you to do is install larger graphics cards or anything like that there. The bottom one is also removable, so it had screws 2 here and then 4 on the base. Nice solid installation of that. And there are also 2 thumb screws on the front of them which hold it in from this side as well. The optical drives can also be removed. There are a whole load of screws on that, and we're going to have to remove a couple more that I didn't notice, but we had 2 on the back there, there were 2 up the top here, 2 around the back there, 2 on the front edge there, and we also have 2 here, so just a moment. So that should be it fully loosened off now. A whole load of screws keeping the optical drives in place, and then you see it just, that lifts out quite easily from there, leaving us a whole big chamber inside the case for us to use as we wish. Now this is a case that takes micro ATX boards as its primary thing, and you're looking at something like the Maximus 6-gene Z87 board, so something really high-end like that would go in. Why would we use a high-end board like that? Because this case is ideal for high-end cooling, water cooling, whatever you want to call it. Just tilting it over so we can see a little bit more inside. So we've got a CPU backplate cut out there. You can see that all the holes for wiring are rubber lined. There's a lot of ties all around the back panel where you can tie your wiring away. Standard USB 3 connector in here, all the standard front panel wiring as well. The fans that Fractal have installed are 3-pin. You can see here the fan controller wiring coming down from the front panel. And for the fans, 12cm white blades, 14cm up there as well. And you can see there are thumb screws on the PCIe slots. So that's all good signs so far. Decent paintwork throughout, no defects across it. So what can we do with radiators and things like that? Well, as with most cases, you can put a 12cm radiator on the back there. You can also fit one down here, or just put a fan there on its own. The front panel can take a 240mm radiator. That's thick or slim, depending on what you want. You have to remove the hard drive cages to get that in, and it can't exceed 272 millimeters in total length when you've got the optical bay in place at the top. Up at the top, once you remove the 14 centimeter fan from there, you can see there's quite a long space in there. That can take a 240 or 360 millimeter radiator. Again, thick and slim are compatible. And if you want to use a 360 millimeter radiator, it requires you to remove the optical cage again, and it would fit in along the top there. So what we're going to do now is just flip it over so you can see the back. It's a nice light case when it's disassembled. The main cabling for the front panel is already tied up when you get it, so that saves a little bit of time. The drive cages were screwed in just behind. You can see the screw holes there for some of the things. And you've got the two other drive locations here. So these are little trays for SSDs. You can see they're screwed in. You can remove them, you install your SSD in, and then you screw them back on, and you can have the wiring, say, just tailing off straight down through there. As we mentioned before, you can see the cable ties, and that is essentially the inside, or the main frame of the Arc Mini R2. So we're going to start doing a build now. We'll pop a couple of water cooling radiators in, see how they fit, and then have a look at it. So yeah, nice little case so far, nice and solid, pretty light when it's in its main frame, hugely flexible, and pretty pleased so far. So let's get on with that build. Before we take a look at the build itself, there's just a couple of things that I wanted to go over, just little bits and pieces about Fractal and about the case itself. The first one is the bundled items that we get with the Arc Mini R2. So you get a little manual, some information on support, saying basically if there's any problems with your case that Fractal can probably send out a spare part to fix anything rather than you have to return it. We get all the cable ties and screws that we need in a bag. We also get a little extra bag for securing the mechanical drives into the optical bays, so if you don't want them to be easily removable, you can get them in there. And it's always nice to see that the standoffs and the screws for the motherboard are in their own little separate bag, which means you don't need to go raking through a great big pile of screws trying to find the ones you actually need. So the other thing that I wanted to take a look at just very quickly, and it's not really to do with the case itself, is the power supply we're going to be using today. Now, this is the Newton series of power supply, and this is a 600 watt model, so it's not anything particularly out of the ordinary or over 1,000 watts or anything like that, but it's about the kind of care and attention that Fractal are taking to the products, and it doesn't make a huge difference to the actual performance of a product or anything like that, but when a company takes some extra time and effort to the packaging and the overall presentation, it gives you a feel that they are actually making that little bit of extra effort with the product overall, so it's a little bit of peace of mind. So the first thing about this box for the power supply is that it's huge, and you can see based on kind of the size of my hand that it is a massive box, and probably one of the biggest we have seen on a power supply to date. It's a little bit of information about the product, so we get a view of the card on there. 80 plus platinum certified, it's got a 5-year warranty, and it's also Crossfire certified. No logos for SLI on it, but obviously it will work with that. And there's a little sticker here just noting the semi-passive operation. Now what that means for us is that when we're running under, say, less than 50% load, so you've built a system, maybe a home cinema PC, something along those lines, you'll have a mid-range CPU, maybe an integrated GPU, and that'll be running on a couple of 100 watts. And at that point, your power supply will be silent because there's no need for the fan inside to be running. The power supply is going to be running pretty cool. As you increase the load, maybe install your own adding graphics card and you're running a game or something like that, the load will tip over the 300 watts and then the fan will jump up to 35% RPM, and then it will gradually increase as the temperature and load require after that. So in a lot of scenarios you're going to have a silent PSU in your case if you go for the Newton. Inside the box, which we get to by lifting off the cover here, you can see there's actually a handle there because it's such a big case, such a box for the case. We've had this open before, so there's a few things are missing from it, but we'll cover them later on. So you get a nice little presentation there with the manual and a thank you from Fractal for buying the power supply, and also noting that there's a few zip ties and Velcro straps and things like that inside. When you open it for the first time, you'll have the mains cable over here, the power supply in here in its own little bag with the native cables coming out into there. There's also a bag there off to the side with the modular cables. Now what Fractal also provides is a little card there, and it's just a little extra explanation for people who are not necessarily sure about semi-passive power supplies, and it just says basically if your fan's not spinning, the unit probably isn't broken, you just aren't running at a load that needs the fan to kick in. So in this bag here, which just velcros open, we have a selection of modular cables. So over here, cable ties and screw kit, and then we've taken some of the cables out already, but you can see some of the spare ones in there. There's our flat modular cables, and yeah, overall just a nice little presentation for a new power supply. When you're opening it up, it is a little extra feel of quality. So we'll take a quick look at the power supply features, and then we'll get on with this build. So this is the Fractal 600 watt Newton PSU. On the top here we have a little logo of a snowflake, and then the company logo down the side. If we turn round to this side, we've got the modular connectors here. There's an airflow vent up the top there. There's 6 SATA peripheral floppy connectors on there for you to add extra wires if you need. There are 2 connectors along there for the ATX 12 volt extra cable or an extra PCIe cable. And in terms of the native wiring, we have a 24 pin connector. We've got an 8 pin connector which actually goes into 2 4 pins if you need it to, and then 2 6 or 8 pin cables for your graphics card there, and the cables are all braided up to pretty much the connectors. The 24 pin has a little bit of less protection on there, but that's because there's a lot more wires to spread out at the end. Turn this over. You can see that again Fractal have used some white blades on the fan. This side here has a little bit of specification information, the key specification being 50 amps on the 12 volt. And then turning around to the end of the power supply, you can see that we have another perforated section there. Almost the entire surface is perforated. Standard 3 pin connector, and then an on-off rocker switch. So that's a quick look at the Newton. We're not going to go into any more detail about it because this is a case review, and you know, the power supply you're going to put in it is your own choice. But semi-passive, 600 watt, 50 amps on the 12 volt, all pretty decent really, and could be ideal for a home cinema PC or mainstream PC if you're maybe going to run some low-end games, things like that on it. So nice little PSU. Okay, so this is the pretty much finished build of the Arc Mini R2, or Arc Mini R2 even. Overall, it's been a pretty pain-free process. There have been a few kind of areas where I had to be inventive a little bit to get the components that I've chosen into the system, but overall it wasn't too bad. The main area that I had to compromise on was the radiator at the back here. Now, the reason we chose the XSPC radiators, apart from actually being quite good, is the size of them. As well as being, say, a 12cm radiator or a 240 radiator, they've actually got quite a big chunky frame on them. So this bit at the side here isn't actually the side of the radiator, it's a big metal frame that you have on there. And it just meant that we were really pushing what this case should be able to do. And so the main compromise that I had to make was that this here is actually stuck to the inside of the case using quite strong adhesive. It's not screwed in, so that's not great, it's not terrible, it's not going to move, so quite happy with that. But we weren't able to use the mounts on there. The standard 12cm radiator we had a little play with, and yeah, it fit fine, but this bigger chunkier radiator on the back here we had to use adhesive for. We also, because of that, had to bump things around a bit up the top of the case. Now if I just drag it forward a little bit, you'll see that we've got a nice thick dual fan radiator up the top there. Fans on the bottom of that mount. It's not quite mounted on the actual fan holes that are screw holes that Fractal put in the case. We've actually used some of the alternative fan venting holes to attach the screws for the radiator. It's still really solid. There's absolutely no kind of moving that. I could just grab my screwdriver and give it a bang. You'll see it doesn't move at all. So nice and solid, but not mounted in the traditional way. So again, a bigger chunkier radiator still managed to fit in there. The standard radiators fit no problem at all, but we've just pushed it that a little bit further. We've also, while we've been doing all of this, managed to keep all the drive bays in. That one is actually filled with a radiator and pump combo unit, so not able to put any optical drives in there, but we could still get the 6 hard drives in there. We've got the 2 around the back that we could use. We've actually populated one of them for this build. You can see that we've got the 7970 graphics card in there, no problem at all. Again, you're going to get any reasonable high-end GPU in there without having to remove this middle cage. It's only for things like 7990 and cards like that you're going to have to consider moving that cage. There is room here for a 12cm fan. We've slightly overrun that because of the UV light down the side of the case here, but it's one of the areas where I think Fractal could have probably just pushed the size of the case that a little bit more. If we had, say, ½ centimetre more on every dimension, you probably could have got a 14cm space down here. There would have been a little touch extra room at the back for wiring because it is quite tight in places back there, but overall it was not a bad build. A couple of the things that we noticed. We changed the thumb screw here just to a normal screw, just to give us that little bit of wiggle room in there. It's not a design flaw, but for our particular build it made a difference, and I think for anyone who's putting a radiator on the back there, it's probably wise just to go for a standard flat-topped screw rather than thumb screw. These thumb screws here would have really benefited from having a little cutaway on here. A lot of cases do have that, and it's okay if I'll just grab it up, screwdriver. It's not too bad for getting in there to the screws. It's just you're at a very slight angle there, but the cutaway would have just straightened it up. And for anyone like myself who likes to use an electric screwdriver, you can see that it does actually, it's not easy to get in there with that. You're at quite an angle, so a little cutaway here would have just helped out that little bit. With that, we also noticed that the standoffs being screwed into the motherboard tray, it was a little bit tighter than it needed to be. A little tool would have helped with that, so a lot of manufacturers just have a tool that you put over the top of the standoff, and you can use your screwdriver on that just to give it a better tighten than you can do by hand, or it saves you having to get out pliers, which are never easy on standoffs, or not ideal for standoffs anyway. Just looking around the case, there were really no other issues. I mean, it was quick to strip down, taking out all these bays. It's just screws, and then you yank them out and slide them back in as required. And overall, yeah, a nice, easy build. It's very flexible. I mean, we could have put just about anything in this mini case, which is always a bonus. And there's loads of wiring holes and things like that. It's not quite finished in terms of wiring. I'm going to have to tidy that up a little bit. Also, this tubing here just needs very slightly trimmed just to get a little bit of a better bend on it. It's not actually causing any problems, and it looks a little bit worse probably on video than it actually is in real life, but it could do with just a little bit of a change there. But elsewhere all of the tubing seems to have worked out pretty well. I shall just remove the screws from the back, and then I'll let you see around the back of the case just to see how the wiring went around there. Okay, so this is the back of the case as it stands. If this was my own build, I'd probably spend a little bit longer tidying up the wiring some more, because it's probably average at best wiring wise. There's not a lot of room in some sections, so for this particular PSU you've got quite a long 24-pin cable and PCIe cable. Now that's something you'd normally want in a case, but for a smaller unit like this, it's not great to have all this cable, and there's not really anywhere that this could go that it doesn't cause any kind of depth issues. So that extra ½ centimetre that we talked about earlier would have made a difference, because you're having to run that over the top of the SSD, or you'd really have it kind of tied up here quite tightly, and it's just not great. There's also a lot of cabling down here, and that's reasonably tidy. We've left in here the switch for the UV light and things like that. One of the benefits of being able to leave all the drive bays in is that we can hide a lot of this wiring down the back, so when the case sides are on you don't really see it. And then there's quite a decent chunk of space around the sides where you can tidy the wires away and things like that, and obviously use cable ties in the odd area just to keep it a little bit tidier. So yeah, reasonable amount of room around the back, enough room to get the case side closed when all of this is there. It does go quite tight here, but overall not too bad. And also you can see that the CPU cutout on the back of the motherboard tray is just about the right size to use for this particular motherboard. It could probably do with just being that little bit bigger as well, but there was no problem getting the back plate on. It slid in underneath, and then we screwed it into place. So overall a nice, easy to do build. A few more cable tied locations might have been good, but yeah, no real issues around the back there either. So we're just going to show you a quick look inside the system when it's up and running. Obviously got a number of LEDs in here, some UV kit as well. And you can see just in the back corner here is the white fan on the 12cm radiator. Got the XSPC GPU block, that's the Raystorm block. Down to here we have the GPU, and that's again, it's an XSPC GPU block, LED lit, and that all goes off into the radiator at the front. And if we just take a look round the front, you'll see the LED actually comes out there as well, just at the front there, so a nice bit of light there. You can remove that very easily if you didn't want such a bright light shining up the front. And then there again is the whole system. Hi, so that was the Fractal Design Arc Mini R2, and overall it's a very good case. We were pretty impressed with it actually, and throughout the build process. It is a case which maybe you could say, yeah, it's a little bit too plastic on the surrounds for the front and the top, but you have to accept that sometimes compromises have to be made to keep costs down. And actually, in terms of how good quality the plastic is, it's pretty good. It's not flimsy, it doesn't look bad or anything like that, but it is sometimes nice to have a full metal case if that's the type of thing that you're into. When actually building it, we were able to strip components out of the system and put them back in with ease. It's just basically a case of undoing a whole load of screws to get those drive bays out, and then that gives you that little bit of room to play about with when you're installing the system. Putting them back in, again easy, just drop them into place, screw them in, and off you go and get on with the rest of the build. It's a very flexible case because obviously you can have, say, 8 hard drives, you could have 2 optical drives on top of that. Some of these can be SSDs because you have the area around the back of the motherboard tray where you can put 2 SSDs, and then you could have 6 mechanical drives in the main drive bays. And of course, if you want to have something like a 7990 graphics card, which is a lot longer than the 7970 that we use today, then you can remove that middle tray, and it gives you that extra lens for the graphics card, although most single GPU configurations will fit absolutely fine. As you saw, we were able to install water cooling without any real trouble into this case. We did specifically choose the XSPC water blocks because it was going to be that little bit more demanding on the case than just your standard, radiators that come without any kind of surround on them or anything like that. They fit absolutely fine, but the XSPC radiators, they caused us to just have to move things around a little bit, go for some odd screw positioning and things like that, but they were absolutely fine, very sturdy when they were in there, and there were no performance issues at all when we had the system running. We were even able to add just some UV lighting and things like that without any trouble at all. The main thing that we would have probably changed is just having the little things like the cutouts around the back of the thumb screws, so you can get larger screwdrivers in a lot easier. Maybe having the standoff tool that we mentioned earlier on, and just having that little bit extra space around the case, half a centimetre, would have made all the difference in this particular build, because it would have allowed larger fans down the bottom. It would have given a little bit extra room on the back for hiding wiring away and things like that, that just make your life a lot easier when you're doing a build. So overall, it's a very flexible case. It performs really well. The fans that Fractal Design use are pretty much silent as 12 and 14 centimetre fans go. Maybe we would have liked to see a second 12 centimetre fan on the front intake, just so they were both populated at the factory, but that's again just a minor issue. So a highly recommended case. If you don't mind it being a little bit plastic on the front and top panels, and just the little quirks like the lack of the cutaway and things like that, then it's definitely a Gold Award product. And yeah, pretty well done to Fractal Design on this one. One of the best micro ATX cases that we've used, and allowed us to do pretty much anything we wanted, and would allow almost everyone to do anything they wanted in terms of getting a high performance build into a compact form factor. So yeah, thanks for watching, and if you want to see a full review of the water cooling kit that we used today, we did a written one just a few days ago, and that link will be in the description below. If you want to see any more of the videos, remember to click subscribe, and thanks for watching today.